Hi, I'm Christina with the Broke Girl Society podcast.
And I'm Brian with All in the Addicted Gamblers podcast. And we're currently doing a combined podcast. It's going to be on both of our channels to advertise our new YouTube show.
Yes, and our new YouTube show is talking about gambling addiction. It's virtually a podcast, but with our faces.
With our faces, so we can have more information on the screen. It's called The Bet Free Life, and that's the name of the channel, and you can search it, and we'll put links on our respective feeds to advertise for it. But it's a really exciting. We've put out one episode so far, but we're going to plan to do this hopefully weekly. Hopefully.
That's our plan. Hopefully.
Underline
weekly.
Hopefully.
Yeah. And I think we'll probably stick to that for the most part. And we're hoping to bring on guests, too, to talk about these different issues with gambling addiction.
Yeah, I think some people just enjoy a visual medium and they'll be happy to see our smiling faces. And
Yes.
hopefully we'll get to a point where we're doing some of the episodes live on YouTube in the moment. So that way everyone, it'll feel like more of a participation activity where people can participate.
Absolutely.
I needed to explain participation activity with the word. I defined it with the same word.
Yeah. And I think what's great about it too is it's almost like somebody's sitting there with us having a conversation because they can see our faces. They can kind of maybe visually see what we're talking about. And, like one of the cool things about doing YouTube is there's a whole different group of people on YouTube that maybe aren't listening to podcasts, but like to watch videos and those types of things. So we may be able to reach a lot more people that way.
Yeah, definitely. I think in general, if you look at a lot of YouTube numbers, they're generally higher than I think podcast numbers. So I think it exposes us to a whole new audience, as you said.
Yeah.
And I think one of our main points with doing this is to expose this to an underserved audience.
Absolutely.
Women in recovery.
Yes. There's a huge diversity base out there that does not get, I think, a lot of the information, a lot of the help, a lot of, things that are geared towards recovery. And so I think by doing something like this, we might even bring in a younger generation or, just a different diverse generation or group of people, to share this message with and hopefully get that information too.
Yeah, I think I think the relationship between the two of us is nice because A, male, female, but B, you're newer in gambling recovery than I am, but we both have these similar experiences. We were both playing slot machines.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot that we can, since we've teamed up, we can talk about and keep it, the conversation fresh in the eyes of the audience.
Absolutely. And it's a tool that, yeah, very good. And it's a tool that we both use in our recovery, talking about it, podcasting, and just sharing these experiences with other people. That's a huge way that I focus on my recovery every day. And it's connection, whether it's through YouTube, through a podcast, through a meeting, through just a phone call, social media, however it is something that is healing and helpful. So, I'm really looking forward to this and doing this. So
part of our goal too is to keep the information in front of everybody, because the information in the US currently, because it's state by state, is so spread out and sometimes hard to find what you're looking for. And our goal is to get as much information into an episode as possible, whether we say it or whether it's on the screen underneath us or above us. And so if you happen to catch our episode or future episodes and we have something that might be incorrect or not up to date, please email us at thebetfreelife@gmail.com to let us know that, because we want the state council phone numbers to be up there. We want Gamblers Anonymous and Recovery Road and Celebrate Recovery to be up there. We want to have the Lifeline number for suicide prevention up there. So there's all these different avenues. We want all the information to be in sort of one spot, so that way people can find it. The whole idea is just to make this easier for people to recover from gambling addiction. It shouldn't be hard because people can find the information.
Absolutely. Because that's one of the things I struggled with when I first came into recovery. Where do you go? What do you do? And I know talking to so many other people, they had a very similar experience. And especially in states where gambling is newer, where I know it's more prevalent on the East Coast. Of course, you've got Nevada and those states where it's been there a long time. You've got newer states like Oklahoma and things like that, where it's the recovery options and the information for that hasn't quite caught up to the number of casinos being built every day. So, it's just important to just try and keep up with that and try and get that information out there. I do want to make a quick note. I did notice the billboard when I was driving through town the other day, and I was so proud of that. Like, so proud of that. It's a big deal.
That you noticed the billboard?
Yeah, my state has done very little to advertise gambling help and recovery.
Oh, it was a billboard for gambling help. I thought you were talking about. I was like, oh, those billboards are everywhere where I'm at.
Oh yeah,
gambling.
Those are here too. But to see one that actually advertised the helpline in our state was amazing, and it's right on a major thoroughfare. And I was really excited to see that. They just put it up within a few days, and I don't know, it just put a big smile on my face. I was really happy. But that's the first time I'd ever seen anything. We don't have advertisements. We don't have any of that. And the Facebook and stuff like that, they really are trying to catch up. So,
and just so everybody knows, what state are people, on my feed and stuff, what state are you in that you're referring to?
I'm in Oklahoma, and I live just outside of Tulsa. So it was nice to see. Also, I know that there's probably a lot of other recovery options or help that maybe we don't know about or that we haven't come across. So if there's something that has maybe helped you, send us an email and we'll look at it. And, just let's put an understanding out there that we're not affiliated with anything.
And we're not professionals either. We
not
are
professionals.
2 people who are in recovery ourselves, just trying to share our experiences to help people.
Absolutely. So anything that you see or come across that we've put out, it is just purely for education and hopefully to get you where you need to be.
Christina, maybe real quick, we should just mention our gambling journey, just so people will know who we are and what we're doing, even if they've already listened to us, but maybe they haven't heard our individual stories. Would you like to start?
Sure. I started gambling at 28 as a social activity. During that time, I started to learn unhealthy coping techniques. I used it as a coping tool to just fight off everyday stress and unhappiness. Right around 35, that's where it kind of turned to a problem. And I always say this when they talk about controlled and responsible gambling. I was a controlled, responsible gambler from the time I was 28 to the time I was 35. And then it tipped for me. And then it became compulsive, disorderly, and destructive. So I gambled that way till I made my last bet at 42 and started recovery. But it's been a journey. That's kind of the Cliff Notes version of my story. And happily in recovery.
What is your recovery? What specifically are you doing for yourself?
My recovery consists of meetings. I do a mix of GA. I do a mix of another problem gambling group. Then I also do therapy, and I work with a sponsor. Weekly. I probably hit a meeting 5, 6, 7 days a week, depending on my schedule. And
that's impressive.
It is. I do. And sometimes I do 2 meetings a day. And it's not so much that I'm struggling in this moment, and I am over almost 8 months in recovery. It's not so much that I'm like having urges and these types of things. It's just, I know how important it is to stay committed to these things right now in this recovery in order to maintain the path that I'm on. And then on top of all that, I do the podcast, and I spend my evenings talking with women who are also struggling, and not necessarily women. I talk to, just anybody who's struggling to find recovery or need help in some capacity. Sometimes they just need to talk to somebody. Sometimes just a small conversation can really change where you're at for the day.
Before I tell mine, I just have one more question about Oklahoma, especially you being outside of Tulsa. Is Blake Shelton as dreamy as he is on The Voice when he's in Oklahoma? And is he the king of Oklahoma?
I would say he probably is. He is very much a typical Oklahoman. Very, yeah. I would say I'm a huge fan of Blake Shelton.
I didn't know who
he's
he was till I watched The Voice, and then I was like, this guy's great.
Yeah, he's very much typical Oklahoman. Just laid back, easygoing, drinks a lot. You might want to edit that part out, but that's the good old boy. Yeah.
Well, I won't edit it out. I'll use it as the opportunity to say our goal with doing this as well is to accept all forms of addiction and talk about all forms of addiction. Now, our primary purpose will be to talk about gambling addiction because that's what we are both suffering with. However, we would like to welcome everyone from recovery
Yeah.
in because we're all in this together. And so we do hope to talk about drinking, drugs, and anything else that may be affecting somebody in a negative manner.
Absolutely. Even the less talked about ones too would be an interesting
Yeah.
conversation to enlighten other people on. So
But we'll let the
definitely.
audience guide that ship because you and I, we're gamblers in recovery, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah, definitely.
Till the cows come home. Is that the same?
It is. It is. And so are you ready to share a little bit of your story?
I am. So I started when I was 18, freshman in college. Just started one night with some friends. Somebody said, let's go to the casinos. Oh, cool. Yeah, let's do that. And we could go at 18. So we did in Michigan. And then, of course, that quickly turned into me going alone. And then I was academically dismissed from school because I wasn't going to class. And so then I was gambling more. And then I went to my first GA meeting when I was 24 in an attempt to stop. I went to my second GA meeting when I was 26 because I was uncomfortable. And then that worked for about 2.5 years. And then I stopped going to meetings and relapsed. And then I went back to my meeting and made it another, I think, couple years. Then I had a death in the family. My father died, and that kind of sent me into a spiral of a constant relapse for about a year, really. I don't think it was different relapses. It was about a year of relapsing, and that led to my final bet. And that was in July of 2014. And that's when the podcast started. And that's been my primary. I was looking for a new way to recover because I'd been to GA, I had done therapy one-on-one, and I just thought, let me try something else. And that's how the podcast started. Just my friend and I talking about my addiction. And it's grown since then to what it is now. And I think after this long, I'm excited to do this new venture to get on YouTube. You know, when I was younger, I wanted to be a performer, and I think YouTube is a perfect place for that. Now everybody can do that, and so we get to do it now on Friday nights for now, as it were. Friday night's a good night, I think, for recovery. You probably won't get the episode until later in the week, but we record on Friday nights, and our hope is to eventually do it live on Friday nights. And the reason being, I think we talked about, it's the weekend. It's for a lot of people, it's a big party time, but for those of us in recovery, it's, well, how do we get through the weekend?
Yeah. How do we get through the paydays? I think that's a big struggle that I see a lot is the payday. And for me, and I've talked about this before, is paydays were when I gambled. I didn't gamble every day. I gambled when I got paid until there wasn't any money to gamble. So it was usually roughly anywhere from 5 to 6 days a month versus somebody that gambles every day.
I was the same because
Yeah.
I was a check to check person. So I would take that check. And if I left the casino with any money, then yeah, I would go back the next day. But generally it was paycheck on that evening.
Yeah. I just want to ask you a quick question though, real quick. When you talked about, and when we did this episode the other night, I meant to ask you about this. When you started going by yourself, why was that?
I really liked it. I mean, I think I reached out to friends like, you guys want to go? And like, well, no, we have school, because everybody was from different universities in Michigan. There's a whole bunch of universities all in the same area. So everybody was going to different schools. And it really stuck with me about how much I liked it. And it really grabbed my interest more than school did. And so I would be thinking about it like, oh my gosh, I want to go back. And finally I just said, I'm just going to go by myself. And that was just the worst decision. Because once I became, I was a little anxious about it going alone to the casino. But once you walk through the door and you realize that process and you can just do it, then I was hooked. I actually called the 800 number when I was 18.
Really?
Under the guise of, I said, oh, I'm writing a paper on gambling addiction. I was just wondering if you could send me some information, but it was exactly because I thought I had a problem already with gambling. And I got the 20 questions in the mail and I looked at them. And of course it says, 7. And I think at that time I answered 15, 16 as yes. And I was like, oh boy, this is not good. But also when nobody else knows and you still want to gamble, you go gamble.
Right. You don't tell anybody because you don't want them to stop you from gambling.
Exactly.
I think too, I think for me, I wanted to go by myself because I didn't want anybody dictating my time. I didn't want somebody being, okay, let's go, or when I wasn't ready to go. So yeah, that was definitely when I should have realized that it was a problem. But also I think too, I gambled for 15 years. And it's surprising to me that you knew right away that it was, or, pretty young, that it was a problem. Because for me, out of that 15 years, it probably took 13 to really understand. It was the last few years that I knew that it was a problem and I couldn't stop. But it probably took me 13 years to even acknowledge that, hey, something's not right here. But then it still took me every bit of 15 to stop. So,
well, what changed for you when you said you went from a controlled gambler to a compulsive gambler? How did you notice that change? Because I'm assuming you were still playing the same machine, still gambling on payday.
Yeah, I think what changed for me is when I started using bill money. I think that's what changed for me. Before, when I talk about being a controlled gambler, before, and this is why I still kind of struggle with, and we can maybe talk about this in a later episode, the whole responsible controlled gambling, because I'm sure there is some reasoning to it, but I don't understand it. Because like I said, I was controlled up until then, but I think it's when I started noticing that I was using money that I would normally have always paid my bills. I always paid my bills, and that kind of thing. And well, I say always, I've never had a good relationship with money. I'm just going to put that out there. Never had a good relationship with money, but I was paying my bills. I was adulting well. And then it just got to the point where I was just starting to get into the bill money, like, oh, I can pay that out of the next paycheck, or I can, to start playing that game. And then after a while, it just like all that catches up with you. That bill you were going to pay out of the last paycheck because you didn't pay it out of the paycheck before. And now it's 2 months behind. And you know what I mean? Like when that starts to happen, then it's that, and then that's when that vicious cycle happens. Oh, well, I got to go gamble to get the money to pay this bill that I haven't paid for 2 months because I thought I was going to win the money. And so then it was just like, I was in it until it broke me, like physically, mentally, every which way. So, yeah.
Yeah, that cycle. And then I would get, it happened a lot in my 20s. I would get a second job thinking, okay, the second job will take up my time and I won't have time. So I won't have time to gamble, and then I'll have extra money coming in. But then eventually you find a day off and you're like, well, I've got money again, back to gambling. Because I don't like working my second job. So if I gamble, I could get out of it. And yeah, the cycle just repeated. And that's the hardest part. I was just talking to somebody the other day. I won't mention the person's name, but the person won't tell the spouse. And that's because, they're worried what will happen. And I understand that. But as you said, when we don't tell anybody because we don't want anyone to stop us. You have to tell somebody so they will stop you. I mean, it sucks, but it's sort of the only way to get it done is to tell somebody, to say it out loud to another human who can affect you, not just online. If you can say it online, but they're not next to you. They can't take that weight off your shoulders unless they're right next to you to take that weight. So let them take it and tell them out loud.
Yeah, they may feel a little heavier after you share it with them, because I know when I shared everything with my mom, I can't imagine how she must have felt. But at the same time, I felt lighter, and it just felt like knowing somebody else was there to share the burden with me. I can't explain it. It's just amazing, and her reaction to it was nothing but pure love,
Yeah.
mom's love kind of thing. I just want to say this quote I came across real quick, and then we can probably just tie it up. It says, addiction will make you chase a drug that doesn't even feel good anymore, just to avoid the pain of quitting. And when I read that, I was like, I mean, damn, like that's fire. Because
Where was that
that's
from?
honestly, I don't know. I don't know who to credit it to. So if it was you, sorry, I don't know.
That's an awesome
but it's just
quote.
something I came across on social media or something that wasn't credited. But And I do generally try and find the original person, but just for that, just reading that, addiction will make you chase a drug that doesn't even feel good anymore. I just remember sitting in the casino feeling so much misery and so much pain and so much, that level of just devastation and just sitting there, but you still keep putting the money in because you're chasing something. And yeah, just to avoid the pain of quitting it, even though you're in nothing but pain. It's just kind of
There's
one of
plenty
those
of pain
things.
that
So
comes with quitting, and it's that first real look at your bills too afterwards of like, oh, now I have to take on this debt without trying to gamble and get a quick fix. Now for me, that wasn't always necessarily true. I mean, I paid back a lot from time to time because I gambled for so long and kept trying to stop for so long. So I kept paying back. And then at the end, I had to file bankruptcy because I was just in so deep. And that's
yeah,
something I don't mind saying out loud at all anymore. I used to, like, I don't want to talk about that. And I remember I didn't talk about it for the first year or two after it happened. And then one day I was like, you know what? It's time. I can talk about it. So I'm happy to say that that's what I did. It was a huge relief. But I also, the bankruptcy, it was a main reason again of not ever going back. Like I got to the point of filing bankruptcy. I am never gambling again.
and I know that there's programs that frown upon that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's probably fed into that because you spent years in programs like that. But you have to really look at like how it's going to impact your life. If that's something that's going to help you get ahead of this, and that's something you need to do to stop gambling, to get ahead of it, then yeah, by all means, you need to do whatever is going to help you. I think a lot of people still struggle with the shame of that, of bankruptcy, and or they struggle with, maybe they're in a particular program that doesn't that frowns on it or something like that. But if it's harming you not to do that, not to take that step, then definitely look at your options. And I think too, it's one of those things where just make sure you're in a good place, that you're not still continuing to gamble when you do that, because it can maybe put you back in it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
I've heard that.
Yeah. I mean, well, I think the worry that they talk about in my experience in GA is that if you file bankruptcy, then you got a bailout and then the slate is clean and you'll think,
yeah,
oh,
I think that's what I was trying to say. Yeah.
And for me, that wasn't the case. That's not why I was doing it. And so I felt confident in my reasons for doing it.
Yeah.
And before we go, I do want to say that we're also on the show going to discuss mental health issues from time to time, because I recently discovered I was going through some stuff, and I don't need to get all into it now. I've done that enough lately. So, but we will talk about mental health issues as well on the show.
Absolutely. Because it really does play a part in everything. And I think too, whenever we are voices in recovery, do you think that sometimes that keeps us maybe from going down that road?
Oh, yeah. I feel accountable to the audience of the podcast for sure.
Yeah. And see,
it
I'm
helps.
starting to realize
It helps me. Not everyone's going to get that same help that I get from doing the podcast. But absolutely. It helps me.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, hey, we hope that you guys check it out. Subscribe so that you can keep up to dates with new release episodes.
Yeah. And, with the podcast, I'm like, people will find it. But with the YouTube show, if you want to help us out, it would help to subscribe and share the videos when they come out. And if you're part of this community, we'll happily try to share your story. And also, if you are part of our smaller community, our podcasting community, we'll absolutely share your information as well, because we want everyone to find who they like listening to, who they can relate to in order to help them recover. So check out, it's called The Bet Free Life, and it'll be on YouTube, and we'll both link to it in our respective podcasts. Christina, it's great to talk to you, and I'll see you on Friday.
Yeah, we'll see you Friday.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks.